An ex-soldier helped a homeless man, later shocked to learn he saved a war hero's life. These were the words Jack Sullivan had scribbled in his journal last night, trying to make sense of how completely his life had changed in just 3 weeks. The entry remained unfinished, the pen abandoned mid-sentence when the memories became too much. The early December wind cut through Jack's coat as he pulled it tighter around his broad shoulders. 5 years removed from active duty, and still the cold reminded him of those nights in the mountains, the bone-deep chill that never quite left. His breath clouded before him as he walked the familiar route to the VA office, the same path he'd taken twice weekly since returning to civilian life. But today was different. Today marked 1,825 days since the ambush that had claimed half his unit. 5 years exactly. The weight of it pressed against his chest with each step, memories flashing unbidden, the crack of gunfire, the metallic taste of fear, the screams that sometimes still woke him at 3 a.m. Jack checked his watch. Still 30 minutes before his appointment with Dr. Winters. He left early on purpose, needing the walk to clear his head. 5 years of therapy had helped. He'd rebuilt something resembling a life, an apartment, a job at his uncle's construction company, even occasional dates that rarely led to second ones. But anniversaries had a way of peeling back the scabs, exposing the wounds beneath that never quite healed right. He stopped at the corner coffee shop, the bell jingling cheerfully as he entered. The warmth enveloped him, the rich aroma of coffee beans momentarily pushing back the ghosts. The usual Jack. Elena called from behind the counter, her smile genuine but careful. She'd learned to read his moods over the years. Thanks. He nodded, fishing out his wallet. Make it 2 today. Elena raised an eyebrow but prepared the second cup without comment. Outside again, the cold reasserted itself. Jack balanced the 2 cups carefully as he continued toward the VA building, the second coffee a tradition he'd started 3 years ago. On anniversaries, he bought coffee for a stranger, some small act of kindness to counter the darkness of the day. He was 2 blocks from the VA when he saw him. The man sat hunched against the brick wall of the pharmacy, a cardboard sign propped against knees pulled to his chest. His beard was untrimmed, streaked with gray, despite a face that couldn't be much older than Jack's 34 years. The man's eyes were fixed on the middle distance, seeing something far beyond the busy street. Jack recognized that 1,000-yard stare. The sign was simple, VET, anything helps. Jack had seen homeless vets before, too many times. Usually he'd drop a few dollars, maybe offer food, but something about this man stopped him completely. Perhaps it was the way he held himself, still maintaining a soldier's posture despite circumstances. Or maybe it was the medallion partially visible beneath layers of worn clothing, the edge of what looked like a silver star. Morning, Jack said, his voice careful, neutral. The man's eyes snapped to attention, muscles tensing in that instinctive way Jack knew too well. Fight or flight, always just beneath the surface. Bought an extra coffee. Jack continued, extending 1 cup. Say yeah, thought you might want it. It's cold out. The man hesitated, eyes assessing Jack with military precision, before reaching for the cup with hands that trembled slightly. Thanks, he said, voice rough from disuse but unmistakably carrying the clipped cadence of command. His fingers curled around the warmth. Appreciate it. Jack should have continued on, drop off the coffee, maybe some cash, and make his appointment. That was the routine. Instead, he found himself asking, mind if I sit for a minute? Surprise flickered across the man's weathered face. He shifted slightly, making room against the wall. Free country. You helped pay for it, I'm guessing. Jack lowered himself to the cold concrete, leaving appropriate space between them. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee. 2 men observing the street with tactical awareness, neither could fully switch off. Jack Sullivan, he finally offered, not looking directly at the man, respecting the unspoken boundaries. A pause, then, Michael Reeves. The name hit Jack like a physical blow. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Michael Reeves. It couldn't be. That name belonged to whispered legends, to the man who had impossible. Captain Michael Reeves had been declared MIA 3 years ago after a classified operation went catastrophically wrong. The Michael Reeves Jack had heard about in reverent tones was a decorated commander, the kind of officer men would follow into hell itself. This man, with his haunted eyes and worn clothes, couldn't be the same person. Yet the silver star peeking from beneath his layers, the way he scanned the street, the unmistakable bearing even in these circumstances. You okay there? Michael asked, watching Jack's sudden stillness with the wariness of someone accustomed to unexpected threats. "Yeah," Jack managed, forcing his cup back to his lips. "Yeah, fine. Just remembered my appointment. I should get going." He stood too quickly, nearly spilling his coffee. "The VA's just 2 blocks down if you need anything," he added, pulling out his wallet and extracting every bill he had, nearly $60. "Here." Michael didn't reach for the money immediately. "I don't take handouts without earning them." "Then consider it payment for your service." Jack placed the money near enough that Michael could take it without feeling like charity. Michael studied him for a long moment. "You carrying something heavy today, aren't you? Anniversary?" The question, so unexpected and perceptive, left Jack momentarily speechless. 5 years, he finally admitted. Since Hellman. Something shifted in Michael's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or shared understanding. He took the money with a nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude and respect. "Hope your appointment helps." Jack walked away with his heart pounding against his ribs. The name Michael Reeves circled in his mind. It had to be coincidence. The stories about Captain Reeves were practically mythological among certain circles in the service. How he'd led impossible rescue operations, how his tactical genius had saved countless lives, how he'd finally disappeared on a mission so classified that most didn't know it existed. Captain Reeves wouldn't be homeless on a street corner. He'd be receiving honors at the Pentagon, or if injured, treated in the best military hospitals. There would have been announcements, ceremonies if he'd been found. Yet Jack couldn't shake the feeling. Throughout his session with Dr. Juanishorn and Pinanosh Winters, his thoughts kept returning to the man with the silver star and the commanding presence that persisted despite his circumstances. "You seem distracted today, Jack." "Doctor, Eternia de Bursurnt," Winters noted, her keen eyes missing nothing. "It's the anniversary," Jack offered the easy explanation. "Yes, but there's something else." Her pen paused above her notepad. "Something happened on your way here?" Jack hesitated, then found himself describing the encounter, including his wild suspicion about the man's identity. "Doctor," Winters listened carefully. When Jack finished, she said, "Whether this man is who you think he might be or not, something about him clearly resonated with you. Why do you think that is?" Jack stared at his hands. "He has the look, the one that says he's seen too much. Done too much." He paused. "And if it is him, if it's even remotely possible, how does someone like that end up on the street? How does the system lose track of someone who gave everything?" "That's a question worth exploring." "Doctor," Winters said gently, "perhaps more important than determining his identity is understanding why you feel drawn to help him specifically." By the end of the session, Jack had made up his mind. He would return to that corner, not to satisfy his curiosity about whether this man was truly the legendary Captain Reeves, but because regardless of who he was a fellow soldier who needed help. The next morning, Jack detoured from his usual route, carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag containing a warm breakfast sandwich. The corner was empty. A spike of disappointment surprised him with its intensity. Jack stood awkwardly, 2 coffees in hand, scanning the surrounding streets. Nothing. He tried again the following day, and the next. On the 4th day, he was about to give up when he spotted Michael emerging from an alley half a block down, moving with the stiff gait of someone whose body had endured too much. "Morning," Jack called, keeping his tone casual. "Got an extra coffee again?" Michael's eyes narrowed slightly, but recognition softened his expression. "You make a habit of hunting down homeless vets?" "Only the ones who look like they appreciate good coffee," Jack replied, offering the cup in the bag. "Sandwich too, if you're interested." This time, Michael accepted both without protest. They fell into an uneasy rhythm, sitting against the wall, watching the world pass by. "You don't have to keep coming back," Michael said after a while, his voice low. "Paid whatever debt you think you owe to the universe. Maybe I'm just tired of drinking coffee alone," Jack answered. Michael shot him a look that said he wasn't buying it, but he didn't press further. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack returned every morning. Sometimes Michael was there, sometimes not. When he was, they shared coffee and whatever breakfast Jack brought. Their conversations remained superficial. Weather, local news, safe topics that circled the edges of their shared military experience without delving into specifics. Jack learned that Michael had been back for about 8 months, though he never clarified back from where. He discovered that Michael preferred his coffee black, that he read whatever newspapers he could find, and that he avoided the VA for personal reasons. He noticed how Michael positioned himself with sightlines to all approaches, how he flinched at sudden movements, how he sometimes trailed off mid-sentence when certain memories surfaced. What Jack didn't learn was whether this man was truly Captain Michael Reeves, the officer whose tactical brilliance had become legendary, or simply another Michael who had served and suffered. Until the 17th day, it was colder than usual, the kind of biting December chill that went straight to old injuries. Jack arrived with coffee and found Michael shivering visibly despite his layers. "You need someplace warm," Jack said, the words emerging before he'd fully thought them through. "My apartment's not far. Hot shower, actual food." Michael stared at him, suspicion warring with something like desperation in his eyes. "Why?" "Because it's 20 degrees and dropping," Jack replied simply. "And because 5 years ago today, I nearly died in Helmand Province until someone pulled my unit out of an impossible situation. Seems like the universe wants me to pay it forward." Michael went very still. "Helmand," he repeated, the word barely audible. "Yeah." Jack watched him carefully. "Operation Shadowback. We were pinned down for 36 hours until a tactical team led by a Captain Reeves created a diversion that let us evacuate." Michael's eyes had taken on that 1,000-yard stare again, seeing something far beyond the frozen street corner. "Shadowback was a clusterfuck from the start," he said finally, voice hollow. "Intelligence was wrong. Enemy strength was underestimated. Your unit should never have been in that position." Jack's breath caught. Only someone who had been there would know those details. The operation had been classified, the failures buried in redacted reports. "It was you," Jack said quietly. "You led the rescue." Michael's laugh was harsh, empty of humor. "I led men into a meat grinder is what I did. Saved your unit, lost half of mine." He looked at Jack with new awareness. "You were there, Sergeant Sullivan, communications specialist." The recognition sent a jolt through Jack. "You remember me?" "I remember everyone," Michael said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Every face, every name, every soldier I couldn't bring home." They sat in silence, the revelation hanging between them like a physical presence. "My offer stands," Jack finally said. "Apartment, shower, food. No strings, no questions you don't want to answer." This time Michael nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement. "Lead the way, Sergeant." "Just Jack now," he corrected gently, rising to his feet and offering a hand. Michael took it, his grip firm despite the cold. "Just Michael, then." The walk to Jack's apartment was silent, each man lost in his own thoughts, processing the connection that had seemingly brought them together again after 5 years. Jack's mind raced with questions. How had a decorated officer ended up homeless? What had happened after he was reported MIA? Why was he avoiding the very system designed to help veterans? But he kept his promise. No questions. Not yet. His apartment was nothing special. A one-bedroom in a converted industrial building, sparsely furnished but clean and warm. Jack watched as Michael took in the space with a tactical assessment so ingrained it had become automatic. Exits, sightlines, potential cover. "Bathrooms through there," Jack said, gesturing to a door. "Towels in the cabinet. I'll find you some clean clothes." Michael hesitated at the threshold, looking suddenly uncertain, as if accepting this help crossed some line he'd drawn for himself. "It's okay to stand down sometimes, Captain," Jack said quietly. "Even you." Something in those words seemed to reach Michael. His shoulders lowered a fraction, the constant vigilance easing slightly. With a nod, he disappeared into the bathroom. The shower ran for nearly 40 minutes. Jack didn't comment when Michael finally emerged. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed with Jack's scissors. The transformation was striking. Beneath the grime and beard had been the sharp features Jack vaguely remembered from mission briefings years ago, though now lined with exhaustion and marked by a scar that ran along his left temple into his hairline. Dressed in Jack's borrowed clothes, too large but clean, Michael looked almost like the officer he had once been. Almost, but not quite. His eyes still carried the weight of whatever had happened in the years between. Jack had prepared a simple meal, eggs, bacon, toast. Nothing fancy, but hot and filling. Michael ate methodically, with the discipline of someone who had learned that meals weren't guaranteed. "Thank you," he said when he'd finished, the words formal but sincere. "You can take the couch," Jack offered, clearing the plates. "Stay as long as you need." Michael's expression closed again. "I didn't agree to charity." "It's not charity," Jack countered. "It's one soldier helping another. The way you helped us in Helmand, that was different. That was my job. And maybe this is mine now." Jack met his gaze steadily. "Look, I don't know what happened to you after Shadowback. I don't know why you're not collecting medals instead of spare change, but I do know that I'm alive because of what you did 5 years ago. That means something to me." Michael was silent for a long moment. One night, he finally conceded. "I'll be gone in the morning." He wasn't. The next day, Jack woke to find Michael sitting at the small kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him, staring out the window at the gray December sky. "There's more coffee," Michael said without turning. "Hope you don't mind, I made some." "Mi casa es su casa," Jack replied, pouring himself a cup and joining him at the table. They sat in companionable silence until Michael spoke again. "I should tell you why I can't go to the VA. Why I'm..." He gestured vaguely at himself, at his situation. "Only if you want to." Michael's fingers tightened around his mug. "After Shadowback, I was recruited for special operations. Deep cover work. The kind where you're officially listed as something else entirely." He took a sip of coffee, organizing his thoughts. 3 years ago, my team was compromised. An operation in Kazakhstan went sideways. I was the only survivor, but I was captured. Jack kept his expression neutral despite the shock rippling through him. Kazakhstan. Not Afghanistan or Iraq where most operations were concentrated. Kazakhstan meant something entirely different. High-level intelligence work, possibly against Russian interests. I was held for 14 months. Michael continued, his voice detached, clinical. When I finally escaped, I made my way to an American embassy, but my identification protocols were outdated. The operation I'd been part of had been disavowed. According to official records, Captain Michael Reeves had been declared killed in action months earlier. "They didn't believe you," Jack said, the realization dawning. "They thought I was either delusional or worse, someone trying to infiltrate using a dead officer's identity." A bitter smile crossed Michael's face. I can't really blame them. I didn't exactly look like my official photo by then. But fingerprints, DNA, were mysteriously inconclusive. Michael's eyes met Jack's. "Someone wanted me to stay dead, Jack. Someone high up enough to make evidence disappear, to block every channel I tried." After 3 months of bureaucratic circles, I was simply released. No benefits, no recognition, no identity. Captain Reeves remained officially KIA, and I became no one. The implications were staggering. Either a catastrophic system failure or, more likely, deliberate burial of an operation gone wrong. Either way, a decorated officer had been abandoned by the very country he'd nearly died serving. "There are channels we could try," Jack started. "People I know at the VA. I've tried everything." Michael cut him off. "Every channel, every contact I could remember. The last time I pushed too hard, I woke up in a hospital with warning that next time would be worse. So I stopped pushing, disappeared into the streets where no one looks too closely." The quiet that followed was heavy with the weight of Michael's revelation. Jack's mind raced through possibilities, connections, anyone who might help navigate this labyrinth of governmental disavowal. "Stay here," he finally said. "Ma." "While we figure this out," Michael shook his head. "I'm not dragging you into this. People who help me tend to find themselves in trouble. I'm already in it," Jack countered, "and I'm not exactly without resources." He hesitated, then added, "My uncle, my mother's brother, retired as a colonel last year, Intelligence Division. He might know people who could help, discreetly." For the first time, something like hope flickered across Michael's face, quickly suppressed. "It's dangerous. So was Hellman," Jack replied simply. "You risked everything for us then. Let me try to help you now." That afternoon, Jack called his Uncle Robert, asking to meet privately. He offered no details over the phone, only that he needed guidance on a sensitive military matter. To his credit, Uncle Robert asked no questions, simply arranged to meet Jack at his home the following day. "I should come with you," Michael insisted when Jack told him the plan. "Not yet," Jack said. "Let me feel him out first, make sure it's safe." The look Michael gave him was complicated. Frustration mingled with reluctant understanding. He had been a commander, used to taking charge, making decisions. Now he was forced to trust his fate to others, and the adjustment was clearly difficult. "One day," Jack promised. "Give me 1 day to lay the groundwork." Michael nodded once, that same sharp military acknowledgement. 1 day, Uncle Robert's house sat on 3 acres outside the city, a comfortable retirement property for a man who had spent decades in service. His handshake was firm as he greeted Jack at the door, his assessing gaze missing nothing. "You look troubled," he said without preamble, leading Jack to his study. "This isn't about your PTSD." It wasn't a question. Jack had always appreciated his uncle's directness, though now it made his task more challenging. How to explain without revealing too much too soon? I need your advice. Jack began carefully once they were seated. Hypothetically, if a soldier discovered that another soldier, a superior officer, had been incorrectly declared KIA and was being deliberately kept out of the system, what channels exist to correct that situation? Robert's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted subtly. That's a very specific hypothetical, Jack. Yes, sir. This hypothetical officer, would they perhaps have been involved in operations outside conventional theaters? Operations that might be politically sensitive if exposed? Jack kept his face neutral. That's my understanding. Robert leaned back, studying his nephew. You've always been a straight shooter, Jack. So I'll be straight with you. If you're talking about what I think you're talking about, you're wading into extremely dangerous waters. The kind where people disappear. I understand the risk. I don't think you do. Robert's voice hardened. Black operations that get disavowed happen for reasons. Sometimes good ones, sometimes not. But the people who have the power to erase soldiers from the record have the power to do much worse. This isn't about exposing operations, Jack insisted. It's about one man who served his country faithfully and has been left with nothing. No identity, no support, no recognition. That's not right, no matter what the political considerations. Robert was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. Who is it, Jack? No more hypotheticals. The moment of truth. Jack took a deep breath. Captain Michael Reeves. To his surprise, recognition flashed across his uncle's face, followed by something that looked almost like pain. Michael Reeves. Robert repeated softly. You're certain? Yes, sir. I served under him briefly. I know it's him. Robert stood abruptly, walking to his desk where he unlocked a drawer and removed a file. Michael Reeves was one of the finest officers I ever had the privilege of commanding. His loss was... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. It was reported to me as confirmed. With evidence, the evidence was falsified, Jack said. He was captured, held for 14 months. When he escaped and made it back, someone made sure he stayed officially dead. Robert's expression darkened. Where is he now? Jack hesitated. Safe. With you. It wasn't a question. Robert rubbed his face, suddenly looking every one of his 67 years. Bring him here. Tonight. No phones, no electronic communication about this. Just bring him. You believe me? Let's say I've had my own doubts about certain operations for some time. Robert's eyes met Jack's. If Michael Reeves is truly alive, there are people who need to know, and people who must never find out we know. That night, Jack drove Michael to Robert's house, taking a circuitous route and checking repeatedly for tails. Michael sat silently in the passenger seat, his posture tense, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. My uncle was your commanding officer? He finally asked as they turned onto the private road leading to Robert's property. For certain operations, apparently, Jack replied. He recognized your name immediately. Michael nodded, absorbing this information. Colonel Robert Sullivan, Intelligence Division, specialized in Eurasian operations. At Jack's surprised look, he added, I make it my business to know who I'm working with. Your uncle has a reputation for integrity. That's rare in intelligence circles. The reunion between Michael and Robert was nothing like Jack had imagined. There was no dramatic embrace, no emotional recognition scene. Instead, there was a moment of silent assessment as the two men studied each other, followed by a simple nod from Robert. Captain, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Colonel, Michael replied with equal restraint. Robert led them to his study, secured the door, and only then did his composure crack slightly. I was told you died in Almaty. They showed me photos. They showed you what they wanted you to see, Michael said flatly. The operation was compromised from within. Someone wanted it to fail. I suspected as much, but could never prove it. Robert poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handing them around. After Kazakhstan, certain elements within the intelligence community underwent quiet restructuring. People were reassigned, retired early, including me. You were pushed out? Jack asked, surprised. Let's say my questions about certain failed operations were becoming inconvenient. Robert took a long sip of his whiskey. But I still have contacts, people who share my concerns about the direction of certain programs. Can they help? Michael asked, the first hint of vulnerability showing through his careful control. Perhaps. Robert studied him intently. But we need to be extremely careful. The people who went to such lengths to keep you officially dead won't hesitate to make that status permanent if they discover you're talking. I'm not interested in exposing operations or settling scores, Michael said firmly. I just want my identity back. My life. It won't be that simple, Robert warned. Once we start this process, there's no controlling where it leads. Are you prepared for that? Michael set his untouched whiskey on the desk. With respect, Colonel, I've spent 14 months being tortured by people who wanted American intelligence secrets, followed by 8 months living on the streets because my own government decided I was too inconvenient to acknowledge. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. Robert nodded, a flicker of pride crossing his face. Then let's begin. What followed was weeks of careful, methodical work. Robert reached out to trusted contacts. A JAG lawyer who specialized in classified matters, a congressional aide with security clearance, a medical examiner who had retired from military service. Each provided pieces of the puzzle, building a case for Michael's identity without exposing the full picture to any single person. Jack's apartment became their base of operations. Maps and documents covered the walls, carefully taken down whenever anyone visited. Michael gradually revealed more details of his captivity and escape, each revelation adding to the weight Jack carried, but also strengthening his resolve to see this through. Christmas came and went, marked only by a small tree Jack insisted on putting up because normalcy matters. Michael had smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his face, making him look momentarily like the man he must have been before Kazakhstan. By mid-January, they had compiled enough evidence to force official recognition, fingerprints secretly verified by Robert's medical examiner contact, mission details only the real Captain Reeves would know, collaborative testimony from other officers who had worked with him. We're almost ready, Robert announced one evening, reviewing their files. My contact in Congress believes we have enough to force a closed hearing. Once that happens, they'll have no choice but to acknowledge you. The relief on Michael's face was palpable. For the first time since Jack had found him on that street corner, he seemed to fully believe that his nightmare might actually end. That night, after Robert had gone, Michael sat with Jack at the small kitchen table, 2 beers between them. I never properly thanked you, Michael said quietly, for the coffee that first day, for not walking past like everyone else. You saved my life in Helmand, Jack replied simply. Seemed like the universe was giving me a chance to return the favor. Michael shook his head. It's more than that. You could have bought me coffee, maybe given me some money, and walked away with your conscience clear. Instead, he gestured around the apartment, at the evidence of how completely his presence had been integrated into Jack's life. You gave me back my humanity when everyone else had decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Jack wasn't sure how to respond to the raw emotion in Michael's voice. They had worked side by side for weeks now, building a case and, in the process, building a friendship unlike any Jack had known before. There was something about shared trauma, shared purpose that created bonds conventional relationships couldn't match. What will you do? Jack asked instead. After this is resolved? Michael considered the question. I don't know. I can't go back to active duty, not with everything I know now about how the system can fail. He took a sip of his beer. Maybe teaching. Tactical training for new officers, making sure they understand that sometimes the greatest threat isn't the enemy, but the bureaucracy that's supposed to support you. You'd be good at that, Jack said, meaning it. He'd seen Michael's natural leadership, his ability to break down complex situations into manageable parts, his patience when explaining military protocols to Jack's civilian friends who occasionally stopped by. What about you? Michael asked. Will you be glad to have your apartment back? Your life? The question caught Jack off guard. He hadn't thought about after. Somehow, in the weeks of working together, living together, he'd stopped seeing Michael's presence as temporary. The thought of returning to his solitary existence, to the quiet apartment and the nightmares he faced alone, created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. I'd like to stay in touch, he said finally inadequately. Maybe grab coffee sometimes. You know, for old time's sake. Michael studied him, that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through to Jack's core. I'd like that too. The hearing was scheduled for January 28th, a closed session with the House Intelligence Committee, arranged through Robert's congressional contact. As the date approached, Michael grew increasingly tense, the nightmares that had begun to subside returning with renewed force. The night before the hearing, Jack found him sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the city lights. Can't sleep? Jack asked, though the answer was obvious. What if it doesn't work? Michael's voice was barely audible. What if they still deny everything? Or worse, what if they decide I'm a liability that needs to be permanently addressed? Jack sat beside him on the couch. Uncle Robert wouldn't let that happen. The people he's brought in, they're solid. They believe in doing what's right. I used to believe that about the entire system, Michael said bitterly. I was wrong. Not about everyone, Jack insisted. Not about the people who matter. Michael turned to look at him, their faces close in the dimness. Like you. I'm just... Don't. Michael cut him off. Don't say you're just doing what anyone would do. We both know that's not true. His hand found Jack's in the darkness, gripping it tightly. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that you saved me in ways that go beyond the practical. You gave me back my faith in humanity when I'd lost it completely. The intensity in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes created a tightness in Jack's throat that made it hard to respond. Instead, he simply returned the pressure of Michael's hand, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The hearing itself was a blur of tension and formality. Jack wasn't permitted in the room, classified information being discussed, but he waited outside with Robert while Michael testified before the committee. 3 hours stretched into 4, then 5. This is good, Robert assured him as they paced the hallway. The longer they talked, the more seriously they're taking his testimony. When the doors finally opened, Michael emerged looking exhausted but standing straighter than Jack had ever seen him. Behind him came Robert's congressional contact, her expression carefully neutral until they were well away from the hearing room. It worked, she said once they were alone in a secure office. They're initiating immediate protocols to restore Captain Reeves' official status. Within 72 hours, he'll be officially reinstated with full back pay and benefits. She turned to Michael. There will be more debriefings, and certain aspects of your experience will likely remain classified indefinitely. But you exist again, Captain. Officially. The drive back to Jack's apartment was quiet, Michael staring out the window as if seeing the city for the first time. In a way, perhaps he was. Seeing it as Michael Reeves, recognized soldier, rather than as a nameless homeless veteran everyone worked to ignore. What happens now? Jack finally asked as they entered the apartment. Debriefings, medical evaluations, reintegration protocols. Michael's voice was distant, processing. They're putting me up in military housing starting tomorrow, while everything gets sorted out. Tomorrow, Jack repeated, the word feeling strangely hollow. He'd known this was the goal, to get Michael officially recognized back in the system, supported as he deserved to be. Yet the reality of what that meant hit him suddenly. Empty apartment, no more shared coffee in the mornings, no more late-night strategy sessions. I don't have to go immediately, Michael said, watching Jack's face closely. I could stay a few more days. Help clean up all this. He gestured at the walls still covered with their investigation materials. No, you should go, Jack said quickly. Get settled. Surrender, start rebuilding your life. That's what all this was for. Michael stepped closer, his expression intent. Jack, I meant what I said last night. You gave me back more than my identity. You gave me a reason to keep fighting when it would have been easier to disappear completely. You would have done the same for me, Jack said, uncomfortable with the gratitude in Michael's voice. You did do the same in Hellman. You didn't even know me then. That was different. That was duty. Michael's hand came up to rest on Jack's shoulder. What you did, taking in a homeless stranger, risking your own safety to help me fight a system that had already shown it was willing to erase people, that went far beyond duty. Jack didn't know how to respond. The weeks of shared purpose, of working side by side toward this goal, had created something between them he couldn't quite name, deeper than friendship, more complex than the bond between fellow soldiers. Will you be okay? He asked instead. After everything you've been through. I'll manage, Michael said, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. One day at a time, right? Isn't that what they teach in those VA therapy sessions? Jack nodded, recognizing the deflection for what it was. One day at a time. The morning Michael left for the military housing felt strangely anticlimactic. They exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch, all the things people say when a chapter's ending. Jack watched from his window as Michael walked toward the waiting government car, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, looking more like the officer he was in the new clothes they'd purchased after the hearing. Just before getting into the car, Michael turned back, looking up at Jack's window. Their eyes met across the distance and Michael raised his hand in a gesture that was part wave, part salute. Jack returned it, throat tight with emotions he couldn't quite name. Then Michael was gone, and the apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. Days passed. Jack returned to his routine, work at his uncle's construction company, therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, occasional dinners with friends who had no idea of the extraordinary events of the past weeks. Michael texted occasionally, Brief updates about his debriefings, his medical clearances, the mountain of paperwork involved in coming back from the dead. 2 weeks after Michael's departure, Jack arrived home to find a package outside his door. Inside was a Silver Star medal in a presentation case with a simple note. This belongs with someone who remembers what it means to never leave a man behind. MMM. Jack placed the medal on his mantle, a tangible reminder that the past weeks hadn't been some elaborate dream. That night he sent a text, "You earned this. You should keep it." The response came hours later. "I have others. This one's for you." February turned to March. The texts from Michael became less frequent as he was drawn deeper into the reintegration process. Jack understood. Rebuilding a life took time, energy, focus. He told himself it was good that Michael was moving forward, reclaiming his identity, his purpose. Still, he found himself missing their late-night conversations, the quiet understanding that had developed between them. On a rainy Tuesday in late March, Jack was leaving his therapy session when he spotted a familiar figure waiting outside the VA building. Shoulders straight despite the downpour, no umbrella. "Figured I'd find you here," Michael said, rain dripping from his now shorter hair, his face clean-shaven and healthier than Jack had ever seen it. "Still on the same schedule." "Michael," Jack managed, surprise leaving him momentarily speechless. "What are you? I thought you were in Quantico for evaluations." "Finished early." Michael stepped closer, out of the flow of foot traffic. "Thought I'd come see how civilian life is treating you." They ended up at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, the same one where Jack had bought that first cup for a homeless stranger months ago. Michael looked different now, his military bearing restored. New clothes, the haunted look in his eyes somewhat diminished. Yet the connection between them remained, that unspoken understanding that needed no explanation. "They've offered me a position," Michael said after they'd settled with their coffees. "Teaching advanced tactics at the academy, starting next month." "That's great," Jack said, meaning it despite the twist in his gut at the thought of Michael moving even further away. "You'll be amazing at that." Michael nodded, turning his cup slowly in his hands. "It's in Virginia." "I know where the academy is," Jack said, attempting a smile. "What I mean is," Michael continued, his eyes meeting Jack's directly, "it's not that far. Weekend visits would be possible. If someone wanted to make the trip, or if someone wanted to consider relocating." Jack stared at him, processing the implication. "Are you asking me to move to Virginia?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it." Michael's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held an intensity that belied his casual tone. "Your skills would transfer easily. Construction work is needed everywhere, and there are excellent VA facilities for continuing your therapy." "You've thought about this?" Jack said, surprised. "I've thought about little else." Michael leaned forward slightly. "These past weeks, building my life back, it's been good, necessary, but something's been missing." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Someone's been missing. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way military men rarely allowed themselves to be. "I can't promise anything," Jack said finally. "My life is here. My job, my friends." "I understand." Michael nodded, disappointment flickering briefly across his face. "It was just a thought." They finished their coffee talking of other things. Michael's debriefings, Jack's work projects, neutral topics that skirted the edges of what had been offered, and neither accepted nor rejected. As they parted outside the coffee shop, Michael hesitated. "I'm here until Friday. If you want to talk more about any of this." He handed Jack a hotel key card. "Room 512. I'm usually back by 7. Jack took the card, their fingers brushing momentarily. "I'll think about it." For 2 days, Jack did think about it. He thought about his life before finding Michael on that street corner. The routine, the stability, but also the lingering emptiness that no amount of therapy or social interaction had managed to fill. He thought about the weeks they'd spent working together, how for the first time since Hellman, he'd felt truly purposeful, truly connected to something larger than himself. On Thursday evening, he found himself outside room 512, key card in hand, still not entirely sure what he was doing there. Michael opened the door before he could use the card, as if he'd been waiting, expecting Jack's arrival, despite the uncertainty they'd left things with. "I'm not moving to Virginia," Jack said immediately, needing to establish that boundary. Michael's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "I understand. Not yet, anyway," Jack continued. "But I thought maybe we could figure out something in between. Weekend visits, like you said. See where it goes." The smile that spread across Michael's face was unlike any expression Jack had seen from him before. Open, hopeful, without the guarded caution that had become his default. I'd like that. Jack stepped into the hotel room, closing the door behind him. I've been thinking about what you said, about something missing. And? Michael asked quietly. And I think maybe I've been missing the same thing. They stood there for a moment, two soldiers who had seen too much, lost too much, yet somehow found in each other a reason to believe in second chances. Then Michael stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his hand reaching out to clasp Jack's shoulder, the same gesture from months ago, but now containing a promise rather than a goodbye. One day at a time, he suggested, echoing their earlier conversation. Jack smiled, the tightness that had been in his chest for weeks finally easing. One day at a time. 6 months later, Jack Sullivan stood on the parade grounds of the Naval Academy, watching as Captain Michael Reeves led a tactical training exercise for new officer candidates. The transformation was remarkable. From the homeless veteran on a street corner to the commanding presence before him, respected and whole. Jack had kept his apartment, his job, but the weekends found him increasingly in Virginia. What had started as occasional visits had evolved into something neither man had anticipated, but both had come to rely on. A partnership built on shared experience, mutual respect, and a connection that defied conventional definition. As the exercise concluded and the candidates dispersed, Michael spotted Jack and walked over, professional demeanor giving way to a more personal smile. "You're early," he noted, checking his watch. "Thought you weren't getting in until 6. Left work early." Jack shrugged. "Figured I'd come watch the legendary Captain Reeves in action." Michael laughed, the sound still rare enough to feel like a gift. "Hardly legendary. Just trying to teach these kids how to think beyond the textbook." They walked together toward the faculty housing where Michael now lived. Their conversation easy, comfortable in a way Jack had never experienced with anyone else. "I was thinking," Michael said as they reached his door, "about that journal entry you showed me once. The one you started writing the night after we met." Jack remembered the unfinished sentence, abandoned when the emotions became too overwhelming. An ex-soldier helped a homeless man, later shocked to learn he saved a war hero's life. "What about it?" he asked. Michael unlocked his door, gesturing Jack inside. "Did you ever finish it?" Jack shook his head. "Never found the right ending." Michael smiled, that rare, unguarded expression that transformed his face. "Maybe that's because it isn't over yet." Jack considered this as he followed Michael into the apartment that was becoming as familiar as his own. Perhaps some stories didn't need neat conclusions. Perhaps the most important ones continued to unfold, page by page, day by day. Stories of second chances, of unexpected connections, of lives transformed through the simple, profound act of one person refusing to walk past another in need. "You might be right," he said, closing the door behind them. "Maybe the best part is still being written."